today's webinar sponsored by CASIA. We'll start at 2 o'clock. In the meantime, thank you for joining us. We do want to keep this webinar as a interaction as much as possible, but we have muted your mic and your camera because of the numbers of people that could participate. So with that, if you'd like to communicate with us, there is a question and answer feature in Zoom, and we invite you to write your questions and send them into our panelists, and we'll be sure to respond to them in the context of the presentation. We will get started right at 2 o'clock, and so just bear with us as others join, and at the top of the hour, we'll be sure to start this webinar on how to protect yourself from spam. Again, thank you for joining us for today's webinar. It's called SCAMS, How to Protect Yourself and Your Family. We'll get started here in just a few moments. Again, if you'd like to submit questions or comments to the panelists, we ask you to use the Q&A feature within Zoom. There's also a chat feature in Zoom, and if you are having technical issues, whether connecting into Zoom or submitting a question in Q&A, we have a technician standing by that can help you with that. And so please use the chat for technical issues. Please use the Q&A for submitting questions to the panelists. And it's 2 o'clock. Let's go ahead and get started. Again, thank you for joining us for CASIA's 5-part session webinars around the topic of COVID-19. Today's session is SCAMS, How to Protect You and Your Family. And our special speaker is Jay Haapala. He's with the AARP of Minnesota, and we'll be hearing from him very soon. But before that, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm your host today, Jeffrey Whipp. I'm the Vice President of Information Technology at CASIA. CASIA is the host organization for this 5-part series. And it's a pleasure to be here with you. I've been in technology leadership for over 20 years, and I've been with the Elam Care Augustana merger, which is called CASIA, since 2014. A little bit about CASIA, your host organization. Elam Care and Augustana Care are highly respected senior care providers, mostly here in the Minnesota area, both of them with more than 90 years of history in providing care and services to the senior community. In 2018, these two organizations merged to form CASIA to better respond to the rapidly changing healthcare environment. It's kind of unique, the name CASIA. It was actually inspired from scripture. It's the anointing oil, or referred to as healing balm, and it symbolizes the heart of a servant. And today, we touch over 15,000 lives every year. About 5,000 employees make up CASIA, and there's 1,500 volunteers that also embrace the values of compassion, integrity, excellence, innovation, stewardship, unity, respect, and collaboration. If you'd like to know more about CASIA, please visit our website at casialife.org. Again, because the number of people that are on this webinar, we have muted all audio and video from the participants. However, we do request comments and questions and things that you'd like to inquire with the panelists about. And to do that, please use the Q&A feature within Zoom. That will bring them to our panelists, and we'll make sure that our presenter, Jay Haapala, will respond to them appropriately. Also, if you are having technical problems, there's a chat feature. Please communicate with us, and our technician, Bree, will help you to make sure that you can address the technical issues that you are having. Before I introduce Jay, this is a very timely topic in our history. Scams for especially seniors. From a personal standpoint, I have a 94-year-old father. And within the last month, somebody called him and tried to get his Social Security number and other confidential information from him. Now, fortunately, my father and I have had conversations on these scams and what people are trying to do. And so he was able to hang up on this caller without giving any identifiable information. However, he has a friend that was called at about the same time who unfortunately did not understand what these callers are trying to do. And he did give up personal information. And so the topic of scams, how to protect you and your family, is very, very important, especially to our senior community. And so it's a pleasure to introduce Jay Haapala, our presenter for today. He is an Associate State Director of Community Engagement with AARP Minnesota and leads the Fraud Watch Network program, which serves to educate consumers about fraud, scams, and identity theft. He and AARP fraud fighters volunteer to meet with hundreds of community groups across the state, law enforcement officials, and fraud investigators, learning how people are being targeted right here and now in Minnesota. He has worked and served in the Minnesota nonprofit sector for 20 years, building volunteer programs, and now is doing the same to build a network of fraud fighters with AARP. And so with that, I turn it over and welcome Jay Haapala to our webinar series.
Thanks very much, Jeff, for the introduction, and thanks to the team there at CASIA for bringing us together today. I do work for AARP here in Minnesota. Of course, we are a big membership association for people over the age of 50. We work on many different issues that affect people, older people across the country. We do legislative advocacy in a nonpartisan and nonprofit way, but we do influence legislators to make sure that the issues that affect people over the age of 50 are at the forefront of our public discourse and also our decision makers' mind when they're at the legislature making decisions that affect us all. And then we also have the opportunity to listen to hundreds and thousands of our members, find out what's important to them, and provide educational programs like what we're here today to discuss. When we survey AARP members about the issues important to them, every year we find out that fraud and identity theft and scams are at the top of the list of what people are concerned about and also in what they're interested in learning about. So we know that this is an important topic and it's popular across the board. I think Jeff was saying in his story about his dad and his dad's friend that knowledge and education is such an important tool in our fight against identity theft and fraud. I work with law enforcement and investigators, and they tell us the same message over and over again, that once someone has lost money and been victimized, it's nearly impossible to track down that money. It's very difficult to be tracing these transactions, whether it's to catch the bad guys and the con artists who are stealing this money from us, or even to get that money back and recover any of the funds. So it's in all of our best interest to be educated, stay up to date on the latest scams, and help each other as well. You can take what you learn in today's webinar and share it with your family, friends, and like Jeff's dad and his friend, perhaps stop some big financial losses before they happen. So as far as the agenda today, what I'd like to do with you is set the context some for how financial fraud and scams have changed throughout the pandemic that we're all still dealing with. In some cases, there are new scams In other cases, the old scams that have been around for a long time, they seem like the oldest trick in the book, but they have new power because of the situation and the crisis that we are living through. I want to encourage you to send in those questions to Q&A and utilize the chat function. It can be kind of lonely on this side of the screen, so I want to make sure that I'm getting to you the information that you're here to receive, and it's helpful to me just to sort of see that you're out there and listening, and also that you can hear me. So I'll do my best to keep my volume up so that you can hear comfortably, but if I sort of start to fade away, just let me know and I'll perk up again and start talking loud and do the best I can. So we're going to talk about the specific scams. I'm going to set some context about the pandemic and how we're living now. And by the time we're finished, we'll make sure to talk about how you can protect yourselves as well. So what is this perfect storm that I'm describing? It's in normal times before the pandemic, con artists and scammers had to work very hard to create these conditions where victims would be handing over their money. But some of these conditions we're living with them more so now because of the pandemic. Among the list here is definitely fear and uncertainty. People are concerned and scared about catching the virus, but we're also dealing with new experiences that we haven't had before. I would assume many people before the past year had not received a economic stimulus payment from the government. So that was a process that we didn't know what to expect. We don't know what it's like when a contact tracer is calling us or texting us or emailing us, trying to get information from us so that we can fight the pandemic. So these are new experiences. I'll bet before this year, many folks here today hadn't really been on a video conference call. I know even for myself, being a professional doing my job every day, it wasn't something I was doing every day, logging into all these different video conference meetings on all the different platforms that work differently. We're learning, but because of that uncertainty with technology, it makes us more vulnerable. In addition, the average person, no matter if you're younger or older, right now we're more isolated than we were a year ago. We're not having the same amount of contact with our friends and family and coworkers that we did before. And that's what the con artists need. They need us to be, their victims to be isolated so that we don't, so that they can really use their psychological tricks on their victims and meet their criminal goals because we're isolated. We're also more available. So as I talk with the public, I do so often, there is this idea out there that older people are being victimized much more than younger people with financial crimes, and that's just not true. In fact, younger people are scammed more frequently, but when older people are scammed, they tend to lose a lot more money. I'm not saying that every older person is wealthy and has disposable income at their fingertips, but many people do. And the con artists know that. Plus, back before the pandemic, I think part of the equation we're working with when it comes to older people being victimized is that people were at home. If you're retired, you're not, plenty of retired people are busy, I get that, but retired folks tend to be more available and ready to answer the phone. And once a person gets on the phone with a con artist, that's a big step toward losing money. So just simply being available, like we are all more so today, answering the phone and responding to emails, that's working in the con artist's favor. And we're using this anonymous technology. So I already spoke about just video conferencing every day, where we didn't do that before. But a lot of people don't realize that video conference systems like Zoom and others are used by scammers, especially in the tech support scam. So I'll bet many of you have heard about this Microsoft scam, where people tend to get a phone call on the other end of the line. The scammer is telling them there's a problem with their computer and they need to have it fixed. Well, part of that process for the scammers is to convince their victims to log into a Zoom meeting and then to share their screen, just like what we're doing here today. And if you were being instructed, if a victim was being instructed to share their screen, further instructions might be for them to go visit their bank account or log into their other online accounts. And then because the scammer is viewing that victim's screen, they can get those passwords. So even this technology like Zoom is something that the con artists use in their scams. And then on top of all of that, we've injected a lot of cash into the economy, and the con artists are coming after it. Not to say that for a lot of people, those stimulus checks aren't being spent right away to, pay the rent and buy groceries, but it's cash in people's bank accounts. And when that $1,400 check comes from the government, con artists are coming after it too. So I want to now describe what the con artists are after. And the most simple thing they're trying to steal from their victims is their money. So if a con artist can convince their victim to put a stack of paper money into a shoebox and send it through the mail to them, the con artist will do that. If they can convince people to send money, that's what they're going to do. If they can convince people to go buy a gift card at the drugstore and hand over the numbers over the phone, that's what they'll do. If they can convince someone to make a wire transfer through the bank, that's what they'll do. So they're after our money. We know that. I'll talk more about payment methods as we go here through the presentation. But they're also engaged in identity theft. So they're trying to steal our personal information, whether that's social security numbers, date of birth, account numbers, and that type of information. They're all pieces to a puzzle when it comes to identity theft that can add up to financial loss. But it's not just the money, it's not just identity theft. This con artists are also using their tricks to get access to our devices. So just like I described with using a video conference screen sharing program like Zoom, that in a sense is a way that a con artist can get access to our devices. And by accessing our devices, they might be able to find the data that's stored on that device, such as a tax return that many people are dealing with on their computers right now, banking information. They want to get access to our devices. And it's not only through web conference systems like Zoom, it's also through other remote access software programs that the con artists will convince their victims to access. And some of those can even give remote access. So now the con artists through the internet can be clicking on links and opening files on the computer because they have convinced their victim to give them that full access. In addition to access to our devices, they want to access our accounts. So forget about your laptop or your smartphone or your tablet, but over the internet, the con artists on the other side of the world, if they had your username and your password for many of your accounts, then they could get into your bank account, they can get into your email account, and they certainly could, do some damage with having that type of access. And then finally, they are after their victims' unwitting help. So when I talk to law enforcement and investigators right now, they are spending a lot of time investigating and tracing cases of money mule scams. So basically, here's one great example. If you saw an advertisement for a work-at-home job, that might be pretty good work right now when people are responding to these scams that are disguised as work-at-home jobs. They go through their training and understand what their new job is going to be, and it turns out their job is to process payments through their own bank account and then to be sending money out through their to other people through their bank account. And some of these cases, we call them money mule cases because these scam victims who think they're working from home are actually receiving payments from other scam victims and essentially laundering the money by sending it on to other victims and other criminals. And it makes it nearly impossible for law enforcement to trace and to get the money back or catch the criminals. I see a question in chat from Kate. What about devices that use voice recognition like Alexa and many others? I suppose Siri, or some people have computers in their car that they can talk to. So on one hand, yes, if say, a criminal could remotely get your account information to access your voice operated devices, they would. I think the average consumer, including you and me, are no one is trying to hack into our devices. The security software on your home Wi-Fi system, the security software on your device itself is too much work for these con artists and these scammers to deal with. Instead, they would be much more likely to try to attack the victim rather than the technology. And they'll get the person through email or by phone and convince them to hand over login credentials and passwords and that information. So that, we spend a lot of time worrying about the security of our devices, and we all, of course, should be doing our security software updates. That's very important, but it's a waste of time from a con artist perspective to be trying to hack into anyone's device through a network. Even though the media, that's what they often want to talk about, is these sort of mission impossible kind of technological security issues. So another kind of aspect as we set the context here is to understand the red flags that when you are being targeted as a person rather than that device, consistently these scams are going to come with heightened emotions. They're going to either be scary and cause fear in their victims, or it's going to be excitement, such as that you've won a prize and you need to respond, make a payment, or supply personal information in order to receive that prize. But it's an emotional appeal that short circuits our better judgment. And AARP research, by the way, shows that the fear tactics, that you're going to get in trouble, you're going to lose money, you're not going to get the vaccine, you're going to, the fear tactics are much more powerful than the prize type of tactics. They're going to have time pressure. You got to act now. There's no time to think. You can't talk with anyone else. And that's the isolation. We'll talk more about romance scams or friendship scams. But that's a key component of those romance scams. People are shy about dating and meeting people on the internet. They don't want their family or friends to know that they're talking with someone that they met online, and that works in the con artist's favor. Those threats that if you don't do it, you're going to get in trouble are very powerful. And then also the anonymous payment demands. There are going to be demands to send money in certain ways. And it's all about the anonymity of those payments and the way they're processed. If con artists in a different part of the world or even the United States were getting paid with credit card payments, debit card payments, personal checks, the banks would stop those payments in the vast majority of cases. Instead, what the con artists want is wire transfers, cash, gift cards, and money orders, because in many cases, they don't come with any consumer protection, so there's no help for the victims. And then also the very difficult, if not impossible, to trace. So I'm about now to shift into talking about some specific scams that we monitor through our call center. We take around 2,000 reports of scams every week. And so this is where we get a lot of our information from the public across the country who are reporting scams to us. And then, I'm meeting with investigators every week to understand what are these current trends. So we're starting with the coronavirus specific scams here, fake cures and tests, and that were being advertised. I think when it comes to the vaccine right now, we know in Minnesota that there are 3 ways for the majority of people that they're getting access to the vaccine. One is through the state's vaccine connector program that many are have registered for, and they're waiting for those state-run vaccine sites to contact them and tell them it's their turn to receive the vaccine. Others, like my parents, are going through the pharmacy. They're over 65. My mom actually not quite, but has some health conditions, so she got her first vaccine yesterday. But they got it at the pharmacy near where they live. And so others, that's one way you can get the vaccine. Another is through, what is the other? It's through your healthcare provider. So my wife got a phone call from our clinic and they said it's her turn. She has some health conditions too, so she was up for the vaccine. So that's 3 ways in Minnesota folks are getting the vaccine. Guess what? Those are exactly who the con artists are going to be impersonating. So when you get that solicitation for the vaccine, it's important to be able to verify that, and you can. But if anyone is telling you you can get the vaccine through the mail, or they'll send it to you at home, or you need to supply either your social security number or payment information to receive the vaccine or to get in line, those are scams. I'll leave it at that with the vaccine, and folks, if you have more questions about that, you can add them in the chat or through the Q&A function. I should say that they want you to use the Q&A function with questions. So also related to the pandemic, people are receiving their economic relief payments, more commonly called stimulus checks. So there are some cases, I see it mostly on social media and from local law enforcement, to caution folks about mail theft, and that is a real concern. However, I think most people are getting their payments through direct deposit. If you have a mailbox out on the curb, that is a risk for identity theft, no matter what. Consider a locking mailbox that would prevent that type of mail theft. More often, I think the thieves are after your outgoing mail more so than guessing the rare day that you get some incoming mail that would be worth anything to them. Charity imposters are certainly thriving right now. And the best advice for charity scams is just that instead of responding to solicitations that might come over the phone or the internet or your email, instead, as a philanthropist, you should be doing your own contacts and seeking out your own verified charities. There are some ways to verify charities, of course, like give.org is one for larger nationwide charities to verify who you're dealing with. In Minnesota, I'm sort of blanking on the local charity verification system. What is it? The Minnesota Council of Foundations, I believe, is right. So investment scams, I was just speaking with the Minnesota Department of Commerce, and they are the ones who regulate brokers and dealers of investments in the state of Minnesota. Their best advice is that if anyone is trying to sell you investments, to be cautious and to verify their licensure status with the Minnesota Department of Commerce. But, right, we had some fluctuations in the stock market. People lost money, people lost their jobs, and it's very attractive right now that if someone is presented with an investment opportunity, that they might take advantage of it, but it's time to be cautious with those type of investments. Commerce was talking about gold coins and bullion investments, and if people collect gold and gold coins, but they are regulated differently. And if you're considering an investment in coins, it would be a good idea to contact the Minnesota Department of Commerce first. Of course, it is tax season right now, and the scammers are inserting themselves and using the tax season as a current event and a headline to catch our attention because they know it's relative to us. Meanwhile, the federal government is changing deadlines, and that just adds to the confusion. I was talking with the IRS special agent out of Minneapolis just the other day, and she said really their focus right now is on phishing attacks on tax preparers. So a phishing attack means that an imposter or a scammer contacts their target and tries to convince them in various ways to provide their credentials and personal information and login information. So picture your tax professional who you trust to store all of your records and identity information and financial information, probably on their computer. Maybe they have some hard copy files in their office as well. But those professionals are being targeted with emails and phone calls, and the scammers are trying to get them to say, do you get involved in a tech support scam where the scammer can get access to that computer, and then of course maybe hundreds or thousands of people have personal information on that device. So that's where the IRS is focused, among other ways, but that's what she talked about just recently. And so the advice is to talk to your tax professional. If you're trusting them to store this personal information about you, it's a perfectly fair question to ask them, how do they keep your information safe? and how educated are they about phishing scams that are targeting these tax professionals right now? Additional trending scams, I want you to pay really close attention to this first one. I've met probably a dozen victims of this scam that is so powerful. Criminals, con artists are impersonating faith community leaders. So your pastor, your priest, your religious leaders, and what they're doing, the imposters are contacting people that they figure out are connected to that church or that temple, and they are targeting those church members, pretending to be the pastor, saying, we need your help, we're doing this charitable work, and we need you to go buy some gift cards and send us the gift card numbers so that we can do our charity work and help the people that need these gift cards. And really, of course, it's an imposter, and it wasn't even had anything to do with the church. And what's so tricky about these scams is that the church has a lot of information online. So you can probably go look up your church, find the name of the pastor. Maybe even the church has a newsletter with pictures of some of their members and names of people who are on the different committees at church. And so the scammers can get that information, look folks up, and come up with a story that seems really true. And I've talked with a dozen people who've gone down to the drugstore, they buy these gift cards. There's no way to get the money or trace where it was used. I described work from home scams already. Very attractive because people lost their job. And I know plenty of people voluntarily left their job because if you're at risk for coronavirus and you work at the grocery store, the gas station, or anywhere, you come into contact with a lot of people. People are out of work. And so working from home is very attractive. Some of those work from home are scams, and they are about money mule processing payments. So the biggest thing about romance scams I want to describe right now is that it is not limited to people who are actively trying to date online on websites like Match.com or any of these other websites that are out there. Instead, the romance scams are starting through social media. They're starting on Facebook. They're starting on apps where people play games. So if you are on your tablet playing poker, or you play Scrabble, or you play other, slot machine games, any of these games where you can interact with other people, some of those people on those games are scammers. You build a relationship, you play games together, you chit chat over the internet. And of course, they're very friendly because eventually they're going to try to steal your money. And some red flags to look for in these online relationships is, one, they can never talk on the phone. So their voice isn't going to match their persona. So they only want to chat and type with their victims. Two, they have a story that's very romantic and heroic. So often they are posing as service members, military members who are posted overseas. They're doctors who travel the world and help these, people, these poor people who need their help. They're a hero, and they also travel. So they're moving around the world. They can't come and visit you in person. But then eventually they have a fake crisis. They need some money. Even though they're very wealthy, they have a story about why they can't access their money. And then often it's the victims who come up with the brilliant idea, hey, since you're in so much trouble, I like you, I'd like to help you. So maybe I could send you $3,000. And then when you come visit me later, you'll pay me back. So that's the power of these romance scams. I also, moving on now with unemployment scams. So again, I was just talking with the IRS, and right now, victims of unemployment identity theft are receiving their 1099 forms in the mail that say you receive these unemployment benefits and you got to pay some taxes on these benefits, and that victim never received or applied for unemployment. What happened was there was identity theft. That person's personal information was used to apply for identity or for unemployment, and those unemployment benefits were sent to someone else. There was a problem in some states when tens of thousands of people lost their jobs at the beginning of the pandemic. They were trying to get help out as fast as they could to these people, and their systems to verify identities were bypassed in some places. So the advice from the IRS, if you get one of these 1099 forms, do not ignore it and contact the agency that issued you that payment. And there's it's going to be a hassle, but there is a process where that can be corrected, and they'll issue a new form that basically shows you received no unemployment benefits during the year. And then finally, credit card theft is still happening. There, at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a big surge in credit card theft or illegal fraudulent access of credit accounts. And my theory about this is that when our world turned upside down, all these con artists who had already stolen a bunch of credit card numbers and were just waiting for the right moment to try to use them, decided that was a good time to use them, because the banking system and all of us were starting to work from home and just under a lot of stress. So it was for the con artists, it was a good time to do that. Back in October, I got an email from our district attorney's office from Minnesota, and they were going to make a big announcement in the next day about the largest elder fraud scam arraignment, or they were charging a big group of scammers with a case over $300 million of losses. So some of my colleagues and I were kind of trying to guess on what kind of scam they were going to announce in this big case, and none of us guessed that it would have been magazine subscriptions, but in fact it was. So what was going on, investigators, when they got some reports of these scams, they found mostly older folks who were paying and receiving hundreds and hundreds of dollars of magazines every month, and they couldn't figure out how this was happening. Well, these companies, they were legitimate companies that were acting illegally in their telemarketing and sales practices. They were calling people, getting them to sign up for contracts, essentially, to receive a lot of magazines for a lot of money. And then they would retarget those victims and lie to them and say, we can get you out of these magazine deals if only you'll pay us $200 right now, then we'll cancel your other contracts. And then they wouldn't cancel the contracts. They keep sending them the magazines and automatically charging their bank accounts. So they arrested something like 60 people, I want to say. So some of that has been collared. But if you say you visit or you talk to a friend, or maybe you're someone stuck in this problem with magazine companies, you can contact the FBI. I'll have some contact information here at the end. So look around with your friends and family, and if they have multiple copies of the same magazine or just a lot of magazines, it could be that they're involved in illegal business practices. So next on my list here, it says telephone fees. Back in the 1990s, you probably remember all the 1-900 numbers that were popular, whether it was like fortune telling or like phone sex lines. People were calling, I guess it was before the internet, and people would talk on the phone and pay $1.99 a minute or $5 a minute to call in these 900 numbers. And some overseas crime rings were using the 900 numbers to charge Americans money. Thanks for bearing with me there. And it was happening again during the pandemic, but for the most part, I think it was more of a media story than it was something that all of us really need to be concerned about. But there were some reports here in the pandemic. A lot of you might have read the news this week about how our investigators in the country had determined that Russia was, doing some illegal practices to try to influence Americans around the election, and also just sow discord with our issues, especially with racial justice in our country. So if you're on social media, you probably see a lot of these type of posts that are really critical of the United States, posing as American citizens who are believing these ideas. But a lot of it, the Russians are certainly involved in that disinformation campaign. And they really need real Americans who have their connections on social media to take, hey, and by the way, like my aunt who's sharing all this garbage on the internet, they need people like her who are known and connected to take their nonsense, disinformation, not just nonsense, very harmful to our country and to our society, and share it along with their friends. So we offer some courses, and many others offer some courses on how you and I can be really smart consumers of the media and make sure that we're verifying our sources and not spreading our enemies' propaganda. Okay, still with more and more scams here. You know, as much as folks want to focus on pandemic scams, I think many of these, you know, like IRS imposters, like Social Security imposters, these are still the top scams right now, and they just have more power over us for the reasons I explained at the beginning. More than a few people I've talked to lately have received the calls that are posing from the Social Security Administration. They are told that their Social Security and identity has been used in a crime down in Texas, for example, and they're told if they don't verify some of this information and follow the scammer's instructions, they're going to get in trouble with the law. But in fact, it's all just a made up story. You know, home improvement scams, certainly, I think just generally people are, you know, spending all their time at home right now. Perhaps they're not spending money on big vacations and other luxuries, so they're looking to improve their homes. And not to mention, if you're like right now looking for real estate deals, there's, you know, you read the newspaper right now, they talk about how people are taking big risks and because the housing is in such short supply. So just when there's such a hot market for whether it's home improvement or whether it's the real estate deals, there are going to be scammers that are capitalizing on the emotional stress that we're under in these situations and the time pressure. So if you don't act now, you're going to miss your chance at this new house. If you don't act now, we're not going to be able to fix your roof or your plumbing until June. So you got to act right now. You got to decide right now. And that's how people are getting into trouble. In fact, I was just talking with some people who are trying to line up chore services, home services for lower income folks who, you know, need some help around their house. And they're having a really difficult time because the contractors are all booked out for so long. So it's definitely a situation to be concerned with and monitoring closely. If you find yourself in need of home repairs, just be very cautious and verify who you're dealing with. Another one of the top scams right now, it has to do with online shopping, fake websites and phishing. So, you know, a lot of people, if you don't want to go to the grocery store, and certainly we know about the rise of home delivery and I guess what you used to be able to call a mail order kind of system. But of course, it's just online shopping, and many of us are doing it much more than in the past. But criminals are just simply developing fake websites. I know when I scroll through Facebook, I see every other post is like an advertisement for something that they want me to buy. And some of those are fake and some of them are scams. Sometimes people pay for something and it just doesn't ever show up because it didn't exist. Other times they buy something and it's way less quality than what it was advertised to be. And some of those websites are just phishing websites where they're not doing anything but just collecting personal information. So the best advice is to shop with well-known and reputable retailers. If you can see my screen, wouldn't you know that con artists are even using puppies to victimize people? Another trend during the pandemic with people staying at home more than they did in the past is to get new pets because they're there to take care of them. And they sure wouldn't hurt to have some companionship and love while we're all here dealing with the pandemic. But the con artists, you can imagine, are using those same kind of tactics. Maybe they have a website and the puppies don't exist, but they'll create a bidding war among among victims, trying to get them to act fast and act now and send in a down payment for a dog, and the dog doesn't even exist in the first place. So what a shame. Okay, time to switch gears. Certainly am interested in your questions here in an ongoing way. So I hope that we can have a bit of a conversation here. We want you to get the most out of this program. So we're shifting gears. I'll start talking about how we all can protect ourselves. And what you should see on your screen is my advice for how you can completely scam proof your life. If you do these three things, you will never lose money to any type of financial crime. This is how you limit or reduce and eliminate your liability for losses due to financial fraud. Knowing about the scams that I just described, keeping up to date, reading articles, learning about the trends, that's all good and important. It helps you reduce your risk for being victimized. These three things are what you do to make sure that you don't lose any money to a scam. Number one, you monitor your financial accounts. Number two, you check your credit report regularly. And number three, when you make those payments, you stay within the banking system, always paying with personal check, credit card, debit card, and automatic bill pay, and being very, very cautious if you're ever asked to pay with cash, gift card, money order, or wire transfer. And now I'll explain each of these steps in greater detail. So number one, you monitor your financial accounts. Because of the way our consumer protection laws are set up in this country, this is your duty. This is your obligation. It's your responsibility to monitor your financial accounts. And if you see something suspicious, if you see a fraudulent transaction, your job is to report it to the financial institution. And this goes for your bank accounts, checking and saving. It goes for your credit accounts. It goes for your investment accounts. Your job is to look at them and report any fraud within a reasonable amount of time. And generally, that means you get 60 days to report to your bank. And when you do, they get up to 10 days to refund your money or replace your money that was lost due to unauthorized access of your account. Now, if someone physically has your credit card, if they stole your purse or wallet, or if they had your ATM PIN number, then you only get 2 days to report it. And that might seem like a short window of time, but that's just the way our law works. So you got to look in your wallet or your purse every couple days and make sure you still have all your cards, and never give anyone your PIN number. You know, someone that I was working with, she asked her son to go down to the ATM and pick her up some cash. She gave her son the ATM PIN number. Instead of taking out $200 over 2 days, her son took out $1,000 and spent it, and that's money that's gone. The bank wasn't responsible for replacing it, and that's just the way it was. I don't know what the police would try to do between a mother and son. If it would be illegal for him to take that money unauthorized. We can get into that if anyone really wanted to. So that's how you protect the money and the credit that you have. That's how you protect your accounts. You just watch them and report any fraud, and you get your money back. Number two, you check your credit reports, and that's how you make sure your identity isn't being used to get someone else's money, some credit in your name. You can do that generally in normal times. You can do it for free 3 times a year, once from each of the 3 major credit reporting bureaus. Right now, until April, you can do it every week for free. So if you needed to or wanted to, the website is annualcreditreport.com. Don't just go online and search up free credit report, because there's a bunch of imposters out there who would like to steal your personal information and or just charge you $20 to go check your credit report for free and collect all your information. So instead, it's annualcreditreport.com. I see the question in the chat. It asks, is one credit reporting bureau better than the others? Do they use different criteria for assigning a credit score? So I would say one is not better than another. There is Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, who are authorized by law to collect and sell information about consumers' creditworthiness. So that's the first question some people ask is, why are these companies collecting all their information in the first place? And because they're legally authorized to. So we decided in our country that we need to authorize these companies to deal in our personal information. But consumer advocates are able, and our system works so that one, you get information, you can request that information for free. When you do, it does not affect your credit score if you do it in that level of frequency. And you're not, when you check your free credit report, you're not concerned with your credit score. What you're looking for and what you'll see is what accounts are open in your name and your payment history for a certain amount of time on those accounts. And for identity theft, that's what you need to know. Your credit score doesn't tell you whether your identity's been stolen. Even if someone opened up a credit card in your name, it would take a long time before your credit score starts to take a dive because they spent this money and you're not paying it back. So instead, what you want to do is look at your credit report to see which accounts are open in your name and investigate if you see something that shouldn't be there. And when it comes to credit scores, they're going to vary slightly from the different agencies, and they're used for different purposes. But like I said, credit scores aren't really about identity theft. Finally, the third step to take and close these loopholes and completely scam proof your life is to make those payments where you have consumer protections and a paper trail. So if you can help it, always pay with personal check, debit card, credit card, and automatic bill pay. You have protections and they can be traced. Con artists want their victims to pay with gift cards, money orders, wire transfers, and cash because they're anonymous, they can't be traced. And that's how the con artists get away with this. So with that, I'm notified that we are going to have some questions. I think if I click ahead here, we'll get to contact information, which I can leave on the screen for you. And I think maybe Jeff is coming back in live here.
Thank you very much, Jay. Appreciate it. We do have some questions that have been originated. So, are ATM machines safe, or should I go into my bank if I want cash?
Yeah, very good question. So ATM machines, gas pumps, for example, these are facilities or machines where you stick your credit card in to make a payment. So I would say generally, yes, ATM machines and gas pumps are safe, though some skimming devices can be installed in those machines. So one piece of advice at the ATM is to just manually use your hands and see if you can jiggle the place where you put your credit card, see if anything's been tampered with there. At the gas pump, it's better to use the pump that can be seen most easily from the cashier station. And then you don't want to know what, if you go into the bank and you feel comfortable doing that and that's better for you, that would be less risk. Again, I would refer you back to that list of advice I had about scam proofing your life, and nowhere there did it say don't go to the ATM machine. Instead, I would be focused on monitoring my accounts. If my credit card did get skimmed, I'd find out within 60 days. I'd tell my bank and I'd get the money back.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Jay. Another question. Is it safer to use a credit card or a check?
Sure. Good question. Is it safer to use a credit card or a check? I'd say there are some risks with both and some consumer protections with both. So again, when it comes to reporting, that's where to focus. However, say you're writing a check, you take it out to your curb and put it in your mailbox, and someone comes and steals it. It's quite simple for them to erase the ink from that check and perhaps write it out. Down in southern Minnesota, some law enforcement officers were talking about some mail theft cases where stolen checks were processed. And these criminals were, they'd steal these checks, they would wash them, and they'd write them out to cash in their own real name. My question to the law enforcement was, well, don't you have any cases where like the criminals had set up a fake bank account with someone else's name, and then they were stealing checks, writing them to this unknown person's name, and then getting away with the checks? And they said, no, we don't really have any investigations like that. Well, I said, people are certainly doing that. They're just not getting caught because they're not so dumb. They're cashing these stolen checks in their own name. So putting your check out on the curb is, a risk. Now with your credit card, a skimming device, or, you hand your credit card over to the cashier at the drive-through window, and they are looking at your credit card. Could they take a picture with their smartphone? Could they memorize that number off the back of the card just, by having it in their hands for a few moments? Sure, they could. And that's why in our country, we need these consumer protections to say that if someone steals your mail, or if the cashier at the store steals your credit card number, that you're not going to be bankrupt because you were victimized in that way. So again, monitor those accounts and report.
Thank you. Earlier in the presentation, you talked about phishing. So if somebody does get a phishing email, something that looks fishy, is it safe to forward to someone else so that they can check it out and maybe get back to you, even if I don't click on a link or interact with the email that comes in?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. So when we say phishing, it means like you're going fishing and you're trying to hook people for their information. And in that case, it's more about how people get malware on their device, or how people are tricked into giving that remote access to a con artist. So if a scam comes to you in your email box and it's just sitting there and it looks like a scam to you, that's okay. You're not at risk for getting a virus or giving anyone access to your computer in that way. Now, if you open the email and you're reading it and you realize you've made a mistake, you're still safe. That's not how you get malware on your devices. But how people do get malware and viruses on their devices is by downloading files. So if there's an attachment to that email and now you've downloaded that email, you could get a virus or that malware or remote access software connection over the internet. So cautious about downloading files, cautious about clicking on links, because a link could lead to a file that includes a virus that's hosted on the internet. And when you click that link, you could be downloading that virus onto your device.
Very good. Another question, Jay. Have you heard of any issues with PayPal or Venmo? Are these apps, Venmo, are these apps safe for transferring funds?
Yeah, so the rise of these peer-to-peer payment systems like PayPal and Venmo and some others, it's a good thing. So these are ways, for example, that you or I can purchase something over the internet from halfway around the world, and that retailer on the other side of the world never sees your credit information, which, by the way, is more about protecting banks and financial institutions from losses than it is about protecting consumers, because we know that our job is just to monitor our accounts and report fraud. So the issues with PayPal and others is, one, that's a good thing, because you don't want someone in a different country that's regulated different than ours, and our law enforcement doesn't have an agreement with them to deal with criminals that are victimizing Americans. Probably don't want them to have your credit card number over there. However, there are some consumer liability issues with those kind of payments. But for the most part, Visa and the payment processors are covering consumers for losses similar to how they cover other credit card and debit card transactions. So if you are linking your debit card or your bank account or your credit card to PayPal and paying retailers through PayPal, that is covered similarly to how just using your card would be. But if say you transfer a balance of $100 into PayPal and then pay someone with your balance out of PayPal, that's cash and you're probably out of luck. So that's how it works.
Yeah, very good. Jay, we're approaching the top of the hour, and so we're going to bring our webinar to a close. I want to thank you on behalf of Cassia for joining us and providing this valuable information. Jay's contact information is on the screen. I'm sure he would be very welcome to receive any questions or comments that you might have. Also, if you have provided us your email on your registration, we will provide the slides that Jay has shown here after our session.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jeff. And I'll just encourage folks, like if share this information with your friends and families. Talking about money is a hard thing to do in a lot of our cultures, but starting a conversation about how you attended this webinar today could be a good way to help others, just the way you're helping yourself.
Very good, thank you. I do want to acknowledge and recognize Kate Ingalls Maloney. She's the producer of this 5-part webinar series. Her contact information is on the screen, and we'll show it a little bit later too. If you have questions that weren't answered or questions about the series, don't hesitate reaching out to Kate to get more information. We are excited, as we mentioned earlier, this is the second of 5 parts in this webinar series. We have 3 more coming on March 25th, an evening session called Caregiver, Mental Health and Wellbeing During COVID-19. A social worker from within our Cassia organization is actually going to talk about the impact of COVID on caregivers. This session is also available for CEUs if that is something that is important to you in your professional development. Session 4 on April 1st, another evening session, is called Senior Planet, Resources for Engagement During COVID-19. There's a group out of New York has put together resources for seniors that are free, that includes classes, discussion groups, fitness classes, and events. And so on that session, they're going to talk about the programming that they have available free of charge for seniors. And finally, the last session is actually April 14th, not April 15th, as listed on the screen, another evening session with a group called Staying Alive and Kicking. It's actually a seniors rock and roll band, and they're going to talk about how they've stayed active during the COVID and how they've experienced it. Excuse me, I'm sorry. How they've experienced it during trying to continue on their arts and their entertainment process. And in that, they're going to share some of their music with you as well. So with that, we draw this particular webinar to a close. Again, my name is Jeffrey Whip, the VP of IT for Cassia. And again, on behalf of Cassia, thank you for joining us.